Cool. So I've got Dr. Gary Mendoza from Stages of Change with me today, and we're going to be discussing the combi model. So how are you, Gary?
Good, thanks. Thanks for inviting us on it to chat.
That's right, no worries. I think like what you do, and obviously you put a lot of stuff into the group as it is, but I think a lot of it is like very useful information and that sort of personal trainers can take on board and help get the better out of their own business and obviously that of their clients as well. So yeah, no, it's good to have you on, and hopefully people will gain a lot from it. So with that in mind, obviously you're the one that I want to get into your brain. I don't want to be talking, so I'm going to hand it over to you. You can share your screen. Away we go.
Okay, let's get that sorted first then. Okay, so this is the COM-B model. The COM standing for capability, motivation, opportunity. And so the things that I think are really important for trainers to kind of take away from this is understanding how to motivate their clients and what motivates their clients. And then understanding how motivation then will lead into a behavior change. Because at the end of the day, as a personal trainer, what you're trying to achieve with a client is a lifestyle behavior change. And actually that's true. I mean, I work in elite sport as a nutritionist, and even with an elite athlete, when I'm trying to get them to make changes to their nutrition or whatever, we're still talking lifestyle change. It's something they're going to have to do going forward for however many years in all the time they compete. So it's still a lifestyle change. Now, this particular model is part of a larger paper called the Behavior Change Wheel, and I've given you the reference there. It's Michi et al. Implementation Science. And if you just Google, in fact, just Google the Behavior Change Wheel and just put Michi et al., you will find the paper. It's free, open source, so well worth a read because it talks about all the different behavior change models and aspects around that. Now, you can actually use this model as a degree of assessment with a client, whether that be a new client or whether that be ongoing with a current client. And they actually do this at the English Institute for Sport with elite athletes. When they join the EIS, they've got an assessment form that is based around finding out what the athlete's capability is, finding out what their opportunities are in terms of making change and what have you. And so looking at where they kind of sit when they come in. And so as a trainer, you could actually do a similar thing. So let's just look at each aspect. Capability is defined as the individual's psychological and physical capacity to engage in the activity with which you may be concerned. And in a trainer's case, most of it will be weight management, fitness, health, whatever it might be. And the key thing for a trainer to bear in mind is you'll notice that it includes having the necessary knowledge and skills. So it's kind of understanding what your client already knows about weight management, nutrition, fitness, health, this type of thing. Don't take it as a given that people understand nutrition, because generally they don't. And when I'm teaching nutritionists, because I lecture at university in sport and exercise nutrition, I always highlight to these guys and girls that even talking about carbohydrates, that is technical. You need to explain what a carbohydrate is, because otherwise, for the general public, if you were to go out into the street and ask them, they would say to you, bread, pasta, rice. That is generally what people think carbohydrates are. But it's obviously a way broader category. What I'm saying is, don't get lost in your own technical knowledge, whether that be you're talking about muscle groups, extensors, whatever. Make sure that you're not bamboozling your clients. And so building their knowledge and skills is actually really important, because what that does is it builds their capability, and it builds another aspect, which is self-efficacy. And from my research, and I had personal trainers did my research, so it was very much practical, hands-on. And we found in that as a client's level of self-efficacy increased, they moved forward through the stages of change model and were able to make a change. So building your client's self-efficacy is actually a key aspect of training. It's not just a case of standing over and going 3 more reps, or you're going to have to run around the field 1 more time because you were the last one back, or whatever. If you might think that's motivation, and if you come from a military background, that's most probably what you think motivation is. But trust me, it's not. And we'll look at what actual motivation is in a bit if you want.
Yeah, I always say to my PC students, it's like, how are you going to educate your client? So what resource can you give them to help them understand what they can do without you there? Because like I said, unfortunately, as we both know from the groups that we're in together on Facebook, people give out meal plans left, right and center, but then they shouldn't be, but that's a whole another flipping video all
yeah,
on its own. But then B, if you're giving someone a meal plan, in my opinion, obviously correct me if your opinion is different, but I think that's just telling them go away and do that. It's not educating them, like you said, what carbohydrates, proteins, fats do for you, your nutrition, your exercise, your outcomes. It's just like follow this, and you haven't got to think. But I think nowadays a lot more, there's a lot more information out there on the internet, and I think clients are probably a little bit wiser. But then to the educational side of things, and they take it on board a lot better than they did like 10, 20 years ago, I think.
Well, there's 2 aspects there. The meal plan, I definitely agree with you. I've been a registered nutritionist over 15 years now. And in those 15 years, I think I can count on both hands how many meal plans I've given out. So that will give you some idea. And when I had, the only time I've ever used meal plans is when I was working with an MMA fighter who to make weight for a fight, wanted me to write out for him what to eat in the 3 weeks leading up to a fight. It was very rigid. It was very measured in terms of the composition of the macro and micronutrients. And he actually said to me, he said, I don't really care how bland or boring it is or whatever, he said, but I just want something I can follow so as I know that during my training, I'm getting the right nutrients at the right time in the right amount.
Yeah.
And I said to him, I said, you're going to find that really boring, even doing it for 3 weeks. He said, doesn't matter. I'll have the blinkers on for the fight anyway. And it'll just be something I'm doing for 3 weeks. And he said, that's the way I'll approach it. So I was fine with that. To me, that made sense. But that's a very unique scenario, and it's elite sport.
Yeah.
For most people, no, you're right. If you give people meal plans, and Slimming World Weight Watchers are perfect examples of this, they do it for so many weeks. They achieve the goal. They then leave whichever program it is, and they put all the weight back on because they've actually learned nothing.
No, they've learned how to read something, but not understand what they're reading.
And I think the next point about that is, if you are handing out, or apart from, like you say, that's a whole nother minefield you could go into in terms of should you do it anyway, because it's outside your scope of practice. But the thing about doing that is in motivational interviewing terms, I would consider that your writing reflex. That's your kind of desire to want to impart information on the client, whether they want it or not, they're getting it. And it's something that all of us as experts have to try and control. You can definitely give information, but how you give that information is so important, because if it's done in the wrong way, it will go in one ear and straight out the other. Whereas if it's done with the client's autonomy at the heart of it, then the client will take on board that information because they're interested.
Yeah.
And as a trainer, you should really see your role as a guide. In motivational interviewing, we talk about there's a spectrum of kind of leadership and expertise. At one end, you've got the directive style of teaching, training, whatever, which is very much do this, do that, do as I say, you'll get the results. That is not very effective, and it will work short term. And obviously it works in the military because it's the nature of the beast, but you can't, if you are coming from a military background, and I know a lot of trainers do, it doesn't carry over. It's not an effective style.
No.
At the other end of that spectrum, you've got a follower. And what I mean by that is your client saying, oh, well, I'd really like to do squats today, or I'd really like to do a 5K run, or I want to do circuits. And you as the trainer go, yeah, right, we'll do that. You're following whatever the client wants, regardless of whether it's the right thing or not. You're just kind of going along for the easy life. You actually want to be bang in the middle of those two. You want to be a guide. You're no better than your client. You should see it as an equal relationship. And so what your job is as the expert is to guide them on this journey they're going. And whenever you can see them veering off one way or the other, you guide them back onto a correct path. And if you see your role as that, you'll get far better return from it in terms of the way the client engages with you and the longevity of that client as well. Because much as it's quite important to obviously take on board clients, it's equally as important to retain those clients. And I think sometimes you overlook this. Client retention is just as important as client recruitment. In fact, it's most probably more so,
Yes.
because it's a damn sight easier to hang on to clients you've got than to try and go and find new ones. So part of your mindset should be, I'm really enjoying working with this client. I'm genuinely curious and keen for them to get good results. And I'm going to work with them to achieve those results. And that way you'll hang on to clients way better. And part of that is going to be educating them and giving them skills. And that builds their capability.
Definitely.
In the middle, we've got motivation. Now, I've already kind of discussed this a little bit, but the screaming and shouting and 3 more reps and you're doing great and all that, it is a form of motivation, but it's extrinsic motivation and it's not effective, or it's the least effective of a form of motivation. In an ideal world, what we want from our clients is what we would call intrinsic motivation. And I'll have a look at what that actually means in a minute, just so you understand, because I think understanding motivation is actually a quite important skill for a PT to possess. So we are trying to build our clients' intrinsic motivation. And then the final part of the actual COM part of the COM-B model is opportunity. And that's defined as all the factors that lie outside the individual that make the behavior possible or prompt it. Now, you might think, why is that important? It's important because what we're talking about here is peer group, significant other, all these things. They will impact on how much your client is able to implement ideas, education that you give them. And so it's quite important that you make sure that they've got a good support group around them. It's also quite important. So it says opportunity. And opportunity, if you're talking to them about healthy eating and preparing food, whatever, they might not have cooking skills. And do not assume that everybody does. And so part of your role might be a quick cookery lesson, or at least point them in a YouTube video where they can learn that. Because again, now what we're doing is we're building up the skills. But they have to have the opportunity to be able to prepare healthier food, healthier meals. If you're saying to them, this is a great recipe, and the only place they can shop is the corner shop and it's got limited food, then, well, they're not going to be able to get half the ingredients. Could be their budget's a bit tight. And so some of the things you're talking about are just outside of their budget. And again, don't take any assumptions here. Make sure that they can afford this, they do want to do it, whatever. And so you're kind of making sure that all the tools are in place. So as the client's motivation will increase, and then you can see that as motivation increases, along with the other two, you will ultimately get the behavior change. Now, something I should point out here, because this is often overlooked, you'll notice that the arrows are 2 ways. And so as your client's behaviors change, you're going to have to change up the way you're teaching, the way you're educating, because now they're understanding certain things. They've acquired certain skills. And so it's quite important that you're kind of staying ahead of that curve in terms of where your clients are at. So as they are continually building on the skills and knowledge that they've got, you don't just impart it at the start and think, yay, job done. We'll just do this for 12 weeks and they'll get where they want to go. That's just not going to happen. And kind of ties in with what you do, Carl, in terms of education. I think it's a good point to highlight that as a trainer, you are never the done deal. you should always be trying to improve your education and become the best you can be at what you do. You don't necessarily want to be a jack of all trades, but you do want to have a good skill set around what you want to do. And that means continually upgrading your knowledge. I mean, I've got a doctorate in nutrition and behavior change and psychology, but I'm currently doing a course on cognitive behavior therapy. I could quite happily, quite easily sit back and go, no, I've got loads of knowledge now, I'll carry on.
Yeah.
But I never want to do that. And I always think that when that day arrives, it's most probably the day I should retire. When I think, I know it all now, then most probably that's the time to knock it on the head. Because it's such a, I mean, I've been a personal trainer now for 28 years, and it has just changed so much over those 28 years. It's a continually moving target. And so as a trainer, if you want to be successful long term, it's very important that you're increasing your knowledge and skills, because you want your capability changing. Because equally as your clients, if your capability is changing, your motivation is growing and your behaviors change, and that's picked up on by your clients. So it's a very kind of liquid thing. This, it applies to you as much as it does to your clients.
Well, definitely. And I think that's the, you know, I've seen like delivering courses for 10 years now. You sort of see the ones that are personal trainers and they think, oh, I've made it, I'm a personal trainer. But then they've not thought outside the box, like you said, and continued to understand the business itself, because you've got sales, marketing, admin, accounts. And that's just from like the business side of things, let alone, like you said, the actual increase in your knowledge, because a female client might become pregnant. So you've got to go down that route and potentially learn pre and postnatal exercise. So there's always like add-on courses you can do, but again, it's not just a case of, right, I'm a personal trainer, like clients are going to come flooding. You've got to sort of educate yourself how you're going to get those clients. And even listening to this, like our class, this is education, you know, watching webinars and stuff, you're still going to take great nuggets away that you can go and implement. And then, like you said, that's going to motivate and change that behavior, and they might look at things differently and approach people in a different way. So but it's out there, isn't it? It's whether they go and do it. That's the other side of it.
Yeah, my kind of advice would be, as far as education goes, if you plan out your week, a good chunk of that hopefully is you working with clients, but there needs to be a chunk in there, as you say, like doing your social media, your marketing, your advertising, making sure your books are up to date, kind of this type of thing. There should at least be a couple of hours in there education, where you're thinking, right, well, this week I'll read that book, or I'll listen to that audio book, or like you say, I'll watch a webinar. Everything, if you pick up one nugget from any webinar, you're now a better trainer, because you've now got a new skill. It might not be a master skill, but nonetheless, it's a skill. And so it's that continue going up the steps. There might be only little steps, but if you take enough little steps, you get quite a long way up.
Yeah.
So yeah, make time for education. There's never a time where education isn't going to be a good thing.
No.
Right, so to kind of carry on the theme, look at motivation. This is from Ryan and Desai, self-determination theory. The reference at the bottom there, I think one's running over the top, but you can pretty much make it out, I think. If I escape that, can I change it? No, I'll leave it as it is for now.
That's right. It's on the next, I think it just appeared on the next slide anyway, didn't it?
Oh, right. Okay, I've got it there. I couldn't remember. Okay, so anyway, we've kind of talked a fair bit about this, but I just really want to talk about the two ends of it. You can see you've got like the traffic light system. You've got the military style discipline, as I would call it, because I come from a military background anyway, external regulation. So it's about your client doing as they're told, complying with what you give them, and then you might be offering some form of reward or punishment. How you use rewards and punishment is a whole different kind of conversation, actually, because rewards and punishment, oddly enough, rewards can be demotivating, which is kind of ironic. What we're looking for as trainers is intrinsic motivation. So we want the green end of the spectrum. And what that basically means is it's coming from within, and the clients are now doing it because it's interesting. Most importantly, it's enjoyable. If you make your exercise sessions purgatory, so as people are crawling out the gym, eventually they're not going to come back because they're kind of thinking, oh, I don't really want to do that session. I feel so rubbish afterwards. If you can make it fun and enjoyable, people are going to come back. And there definitely is a perception that fitness has to be all about out of breath, sweating, not able to move at the end of it. And that's the only way I get a result. And I think as part of your role as a trainer should be is maybe change that perception. Change things up, make it enjoyable, just subtle tweaks every week. This is why they're coming to you. The key in the word personal training is personal. So don't do the same thing every week. Don't do the same thing with every single client. Make it match the client, and then it will be enjoyable. They will come back. And then some degree of inherent satisfaction. So they're feeling better about themselves. They can lift a little bit more weight. They can run on the treadmill for 2 more minutes, whatever it might be. As long as they're getting something out of it and can feel a benefit or see a benefit, then that will build their intrinsic motivation. They'll keep coming back for more. One of the most important questions I always think you can ask a client about an exercise session is not, oh, did you really enjoy that session? I think the better question is, which bits about that session did you hate the most? And they might go, oh, that particular exercise, I really hate that. If you're any good at your job, you should pretty much be able to find another way of exercising that muscle group.
Yeah.
And so the next week you swap that one out. And they're like, oh, I don't have to do that then. No, we can do that a different way. So all the time you're tweaking it for them. Plus it keeps it interesting anyway. If every week you come in and you know you're going to do A, B, C, D, that becomes really boring. It's a bit like when you do the same journey to work every day, you get to know all the milestones, and no matter how hard you try, you can't kid yourself that, oh, it's only another 5 minutes, because you know full well it's another 20 minutes.
Yeah.
It's similar with exercise. So keep it fun, mix it up, because that will keep them coming back. So we're trying to build intrinsic motivation. And here the reference is clearer there, so you can find it there. If you just search on motivation theory or self-determination theory on Google, you will find loads of articles. You don't necessarily need to buy the book. You can normally find lots of kind of free journal articles around this to give you as much information as you need, unless you really want to go in some depth. There are different types of motivation, as I've already said. Key thing for you as a trainer: motivation is desirable and dependent upon autonomy. So this is the client's right to choose. And we've already spoke about it, but competence. Can they do it? Have you taught it properly? Did you break it down? Did you demonstrate it? Visceral experience, in other words, watching someone else do it, is actually, it builds self-efficacy. Because if you see somebody else do it, you can kind of then visualize or realize to yourself, yeah, I could most probably do that. And so if you've got a complicated exercise or movement, try and break it down into stages. It's kind of like having teaching points. But what that will do is that visceral, the visual kind of experience of seeing it, it's a powerful way to learn. It's not all about give you a load of knowledge. Sometimes just seeing it done is just as important. And one thing to bear in mind, and this is from research, autonomy supportive coaches have clients that have got far better intrinsic motivation for task completion. Controlling coaches tend to reduce the client's intrinsic motivation. So if you're really controlling and I'll just do it and just because I say so or because it's the best way, what you tend to find is your client will eventually leave you because you're not building their intrinsic motivation.
Is there sort of like, what's the reason behind it? Because I'm very much like, if I want to do something, I'm the sort of person that needs to understand why I've got to do it. Like, you know, even if it's like designing my website or putting something on social media, I'm one of those people that as a kid, it'd be like instructions out the window, but then I'd fiddle around with it and understand why does it do what it does. Like, I don't care what someone's told me to do. I need to figure it out for myself. So that sort of come into that in a way that if, again, like you said, if a coach is standing there saying, right, Gary, you've got to do this, would that person almost like internally switch off and be like, I'm not doing it because you've not told me why I've got to do it?
They might do it, but they'll do it begrudgingly. And it's whether they'd want to do it again, because they might be thinking next time they come, I don't know if I fancy a session today, because it's just, there's no point. And I think all of us have got that interest within us that if somebody explains to me why I should do something, I am far more likely to do it than if somebody just says, just do it.
Yeah.
I think it's almost human nature that if you understand the nature of why you're being given that advice, and also you're given options, you feel involved in the process, you feel that it's collaborative. So, you know, if your coach says to you, right, we need to kind of work on your legs or whatever it might be, we can do that by doing A, B, C, D. But equally, it will work just as well. And for some clients, it works better if we do E, F, G, H. Out of those, which one do you think sounds like it might suit you best? They now feel, oh, well, I'm really engaged in this. And yeah, I like the sound of the second one. So
Yeah.
now they've kind of made a choice. And the very fact that they chose it, to some degree, there's a degree of obligation now. It's like, well, I chose to do that, so therefore I should follow through with it.
Yeah.
So far better. And that's what we mean by being autonomy supportive. It's giving people choice and allowing them basically to say, yeah, I want to do that, or no, I don't want to do that. So yeah, it's a subtle shift in the way you just, it's a bit like with advice. There's a thing in motivational interviewing called the writing reflex, and we've all got it as experts. You'll never get rid of it. Basically, your client says something or does something, and you as the expert go, you don't want to do that. That'll cause you injury, or no, you really shouldn't do that. It's not very effective. You just jump straight in there. That's your natural writing reflex. And as Bill Miller, who's one of the founders of MI, often says, he says, people don't like to be should on. And what he means by that is you should do this, you shouldn't do that. Now, in a scenario where you think something they're going to do is going to injure them and you've got concerns, obviously you have to voice that. You can't just let them plow on and find out for themselves. But how you go about that is quite important. If I'm being autonomy supportive and they say, oh, yeah, well, I just want to do this, I would say, I totally understand why you might want to do that. But from my professional perspective, I've got some concerns about that. Would you be okay with hearing what they are? They're
Yeah.
always going to go, well, yeah, for sure. But now I've respected their autonomy, and now they will listen to what I tell them as well, because they do want to know why I'm concerned about that. So it's just real subtle. You can still give advice, but how you give advice is actually quite important.
Yeah. No, definitely.
So I said a bit about rewards, and it's ironic that rewards can work both ways. Now, as trainers, sometimes you'll have a program and you'll go, right, well, if you stick to this program and if you lose half a stone, I'm going to give you a free session or a spa day or whatever it might be, some reward. The problem with doing it that way is the client will then take the shortest route to achieve the goal. And so if we were talking about half a stone weight loss, they may exercise excessively. They might go on some type of extreme diet, even though they're not telling you. And it's like, great, achieve the half stone, I get my reward. Now, you put that reward in place because you wanted them to make some lifestyle changes, but it's had the complete reverse effect. They've just shortcutted to it. And so rewards can be quite problematic. Ryan and Desai talk about rewards, and they give the example. It's a primary school teacher who said to her class, at the end of term, whoever reads the most books, I'm going to give them a prize of colouring set and books. And what, I don't know what exactly the prize was, but anyway, it was quite extensive. The little boy that won the prize at the end of the term had figured out how she was going to work out how many books they'd read. And basically what she was doing, she was keeping a track on who was taking books out of the library and returning them. He figured that out, and so was basically taking out 4 or 5 books a week and then just returning them 3 or 4 days later. And so by the end of the term, he'd supposedly read hundreds of books, which clearly could not be the case. But I think it kind of demonstrates that people will find the shortest route there, and it doesn't necessarily mean that you're kind of getting the outcome you
Yeah.
really want. And so be careful with, if you are going to use rewards, it's actually far better to, if your client just gets to a milestone, rather than talk about it beforehand, when they reach that milestone, just give them the reward
Yeah,
and go,
without mentioning it.
yeah, just like affirmation about how well they've done, because affirmations build up engagement with the client anyway, as well as build their self-efficacy. And go, I think it's so great you've done that. I'm giving you this little reward just as kind of as a milestone marker. And now the reward's coming from the right place and it doesn't feel controlling.
Yeah.
I've talked a little bit about these, but I'll put them in there just for completeness. Offering choice is really important. And the choices that you do offer should be challenging but achievable. And then on this final point on self-determination theory, positive feedback will enhance intrinsic motivation because of its competence salience. And what we mean by that is, if the feedback is around the behavior they're doing, the client then feels more competent. And because it's a behavior they want to improve, the feedback is then salient and they'll take it on board. You have to be careful with feedback because it can come across as controlling. So not, I think you're doing great. It's, you've done really well there. I like the way you kind of figured that out. You've been able to, so try and take the I out of it and make it all about the client. Then it doesn't sound controlling or whatever. So that's kind of motivation theory
Nice.
in a nutshell.
Yeah, that's good. So with that, so like touching on that last point, would you ever use like we instead of an I or a them? Like obviously they're the ones doing the work and you're the ones that are sort of just put that program and that advice in front of them. But would you sort of like make it as a bit more of a team or not?
Yeah, we's a great word because it's that collaboration thing again as well. And
Yeah.
whenever you're talking about advice, rather than, even if it is something you do, rather than say, oh, what I've found works is, I always, even like I say, regardless of whether it is me or not, I will always say what some clients have found works is ABCD. It's making it about, so, and the reason I do that is I don't want to set myself up as some paragon of virtue. You don't want your client seeing you as having all the answers, because you most probably don't anyway.
No.
And it's not a good position to be in. And so by just referring to other clients that have done it, or what other clients have found, or what has worked for other clients, it just makes it that bit more neutral.
Yeah. I think like I think you might have commented on it as well. Someone in the group the other day put about imposter syndrome. And obviously it comes up quite often, so it might have been a little while ago where I'm sure I saw you respond to someone as well. But like what you just said there, like as a personal trainer, you're not going to know everything, but 9 times out of 10, you're going to know more than that client because they're
Yeah.
coming to you for that advice. But like you just said there, if you don't know, there's no shame whatsoever in going, you know what, I'm not too sure on that. Let me go home, do a bit of research this evening. I've got a book on XYZ, or obviously we've all got the internet in our pockets these days. And you know, I'll come back to you tomorrow with an answer. They're not going to batter an eyelid. Like, you know, they're not going to think, oh, hold on a minute, I've paid you for these sessions and you don't even know that answer.
And I'll tell you what, I'm from personal experience doing this with a client when I did work as a PT in the field. Client asked me about something or other, I can't remember what it was, and I did just that. I said, do you know what? I really don't know, but
Yeah.
I will find out for you.
Yeah.
I went, and the key thing now is make damn sure you do. So I went away. Actually went to the library to look it up because it really intrigued me. I forget what it was at the time. Anyway, found something on it, photocopied it. Next session, took it back to her and said, there you go. I said, I learned something there because I really didn't know that, but here's all the information on it. She says, oh, that's great that you've done that. Anyway, cut a long story short, week later, somebody contacts me and I said, oh, how did you find out about me? She said, oh, you work with my friend Caroline or whatever. And I forget, I won't use her actual name. And you gave her this information on ABCD and she showed me the sheet. And I thought it was so good that you bothered to do that, that I thought you were somebody I'd like to work with. And I thought, wow, how
Yeah.
powerful was that?
Yeah,
So
definitely.
Yeah, pays off in spades. There is absolutely no shame in saying, I'm sorry, I don't know. I do it quite regularly when I'm lecturing. A student will ask me something and I'm like, do you know what? I really don't know, but I will find out. And I always do. And my next lesson with that group, I'll start by talking about what I found out about whatever it was I was asked.
Yeah, exactly. And it's like leads on to, like you said, other opportunities, going back to, what you sort of started saying at the beginning. It's even going on to like bringing in new opportunities in a sort of different way to maybe how you mentioned it, but sort of from that study that you've gone and done to help that one person, you've gone and got another client.
Yeah, and not only have you picked up a client, but you've most probably learned something yourself as well, which is really valuable. So
Exactly.
it's like, it's a double whammy, really. It's like you just cannot go wrong. So yeah, every time there, nobody thinks any the less of anyone for going, I don't know. In
No.
fact, I think people think less of people that try and blag it, because eventually you do get found out, and then you've got no place to hide.
No.
So far better to own up. Everybody's got weaknesses. It's human nature. It's how we learn.
Yeah.
So we should look at it that way.
No, definitely. With just sort of flipping slightly what we've spoke about there, obviously a lot of people are online coaches these days and they don't have as much face-to-face contact. It's more sort of email and stuff like that. Is there a certain way that you should approach behavior change at distance as opposed to face-to-face? Because obviously when you're talking to a client, some of the things you've said there, you can implement in like your tone, etc., just as much as the words you're using. But obviously at distance, you can't always get that tone across. But is there sort of more emphasis that you can, like, should you avoid saying things a certain way on email?
That's an interesting question.
Because like
I,
sometimes, like I'm sure
I,
you've sent one or received a text message and you've like read it the wrong way. Do you know what I
yeah,
mean?
I mean, and you see it all the time on Facebook, don't you? The tone of
Yeah,
a comment, and then actually 6 comments down, they're going, no, that's not what I really meant. So I do think you do have to be very careful in your wording of anything that you hand out. So yeah, just being aware of that. You can still follow a number of those principles. So the thing about choice, you could send out a program that's got A, B, C, D, and then alternatives for the exercise. A bit like when you do a lesson plan, like you put,
yeah,
you have to, like for your level 3, where you have to put, explain the initiative, and then you have to give alternative exercise for that. Why not do that? So
yeah,
you give out your program, possible alternatives are, duh, 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 duh. So
yeah,
that would be good, because now you're being autonomy supportive, you're offering choice. I think the other thing is, I always make a point of, when I ever do have any kind of just email conversation or whatever, I always make the point that I'm actually happy to chat, and
right,
I'd rather have a 10-15 minute chat and clarify something, rather than try and bounce 20 emails backwards and forwards and maybe the wrong end of the stick get grabbed. Sometimes it's just a lot easier to quickly talk to somebody. It can save you A, misunderstanding, but B, you can get your point across a lot quicker. So I think, if with online training, I think and this is just personal opinion, I can't support this with any kind of hard evidence, but my gut feeling would be, and certainly from teaching courses and that, students appreciate the feedback when it's verbal as much as written feedback's great, but sometimes it often when, so on the behavior change course, every week they have to do an assignment. It's a video assignment, so I provide written feedback for that, in terms of, you might want to look at this, you might want to look at that, but I nearly always put on the feedback form, if there's anything about this that's kind of a bit unclear, give me a shout and I'll jump on a call with you.
yeah, no, definitely. I suppose like, again, where if you've got so many different online clients, because the way I was thinking about it, if like some clients are going to be various different personalities, aren't they? So if you sort of throw one email out that goes to 20, 30, 40 different people, you've got to be so careful the way you word it, like I said. But I suppose, especially in this day and age, you're doing like weekly check-ins, or you might have group calls or whatever is part of your package. But I suppose they would still get to know your personality long term. But I suppose in the short term, sending out a blanket email, as long as you're sort of doing it and putting the emphasis on not emphasis on them, but if you sort of point them to more educational resource elsewhere away from that email, then I suppose they might get to sort of know you. With also sort of touching on the personal training and the business side of things, obviously you said earlier, like this can apply to you and your own sort of journey as a business and a personal trainer improving.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously a lot of it with like the reward side of things that you mentioned, some people might be listening to this and thinking, well, I work on my own, I haven't got a boss to answer to. How can they sort of change their behavior going along that framework, but as just a one-man person, because they're not getting the reward and recognition from anyone else? But is there a way of sort of, you know, sort of changing your thought process along those lines, if you get what I'm trying to say?
Yeah. I think there's two things you can do. One, and I'm a big believer in this, is get a mentor. And make sure it's somebody that's been there and done it, not somebody that's just turned up out the blue telling you they can get you to a. You want somebody that's got industry experience, has worked as a trainer, has worked in education, whatever, because you will learn so much from that person, because like they can pretty much tell you the mistakes they made. So I would always say have a mentor. I've got a mentor and I'm a big believer in it. But the other thing is set up rewards for yourself. Give yourself targets, because you're not going to try and take shortcuts, because you know why you're trying to set those up. So give yourself rewards, give yourself breaks, give yourself a bit of time off here and there, because that's just so important to be kind of mentally free. You can't be at your best 7 days, 24 hours a week. It's just not going to happen. You'll be mentally burnt out. And so just giving yourself some little targets to achieve, whether that be regular posting on social media or reading a book on marketing or completing my business plan, whatever it might be, set yourself some targets and just say to it, well, when I do that, I'm going to reward myself by doing whatever it might be, whether that be go for a bike ride or day off and go to the beach, whatever, you know, whatever is a reward to you. It might be go and watch a sporting event, music concert, whatever. But yeah, give yourself some rewards, because you if you had a boss, you'd be rewarded for performance. So well, you are the boss, so reward yourself.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think like I always say to like my guys, it's putting those non-negotiables in your diary. Like you said earlier, it's sort of diary management is key. So I always schedule all my social media posts. You know, sort of even Instagram stories and stuff like that you can schedule now. And I always sort of think, right, if I schedule all this and I get all my newsletters written up and everything's there, done and dusted, when you look at your week, you've got like, you've probably made yourself like a day and a half, 2 days free technically, where you've got everything in line. And like we were saying earlier, like I'm a big believer, and funnily enough, I put this on Instagram the other day, like if you're not working in your business, you should be working on your business. Like we sort of,
And that's a real difference. Get understanding which one you're doing.
yeah. And that's, and like we were talking about an education point of view, but that is still working on your business, isn't it? Because
Yeah,
it's
100%.
educating yourself, it's educating yourself with regards to doing a course, for example, to upskill in a certain area, but even educating yourself, like I sort of said earlier, with your social media. You know, that's an education. You're learning how to do social media for yourself, and that in turn is going to bring more clients. So your business is going to grow. But when you're not in your business, like I said, you should be working on your business, which is technically you.
I think it's an interesting point about like the business side of things. It always surprises me how many people haven't got a business plan. And
Yeah.
I do not understand now. And again, this is with hindsight, because I didn't always have a business plan. But now I live by the blooming thing, because it's like I said, right, this month it's a bit like if you watch Dragon's Den, they'll say to you, what are your figures for this month and how are you going to grow that and blah blah.
And they don't know. You're
And
like,
you'll still see posts in the group. What should I charge per hour? I'm sorry, but that's the dumbest question you can ask, because if you're asking that question, that says to me you haven't got a clue what you want to earn, you don't know what your earning potential is, and you don't understand the market that you're in.
no.
It's like you need to reverse engineer it. I mean, I'm saying about the business plan, I've got it to hand. There it is.
Yeah, I've got one right in front of me.
And I live by it. And it's such a useful tool. And it doesn't have to be massively technical. But if anybody that's listening to this is thinking, "Ooh, I haven't got one," there's your next job. Sort it out.
Yeah.
There are the best place to start if if you haven't got a clue. Go on to the Prince's Trust. They've got a template there for a basic business plan, and they've got a book on how to fill it out. And so you don't have to do it all in one day, but just think to yourself, I'm going to do a couple of sections a week. 4 weeks down the line, you'll have a business plan, and trust me, you'll have a lot better idea about what you should. So we've talked a bit now about social media, marketing, and so on. Your business plan will tell you what you should be doing, because it will tell you, am I growing it? Am I picking up clients? Am I kind of attracting the right market? Am I advertising in the right areas in the right way? Whatever it might be.
No, definitely. And that's the thing. I'm aware that we're going well away from what we started talking about, but I think it's sort of useful for like sort of what we're talking about at the moment. But again, you see in the group all the time, like, oh, I don't know who to target, or should I do this or should I do that? And being a course provider myself, and why I set up my own company is because companies don't tell you this sort of thing. They don't tell you what you're going to earn after the course. They don't even tell you
Well,
what
no,
you're
they do tell you that, and it's normally a complete number that they've picked out the blooming ether that doesn't, it's not relevant to where you are and where you work. It's
no,
ridiculous.
no, it's such a pain. And even like today, I had a conversation with someone who asked the question, what can they deliver with their level 2 gym instructor qualification? Can they deliver?
I think I saw that post where they were talking about what can you do in a boot camp, or how many people can you have, or whatever.
No, it's called a gym instructor qualification. The guidance states you can work in a gym, but then the training providers are telling people, oh yeah, you can do that, it's fine. Because they couldn't care less. Odds are it's a salesperson that's never stepped foot in a gym in their life. They're just there to sell courses, or they actually are lying to you by saying, oh yeah, you can do that.
Yeah.
And by the time you figure it out, you don't know. But even still, again, it's sort of, and it comes back to sort of what do you want to do and having that business plan in mind.
To me, that's the most interesting point you've made. What do you want to do?
Yeah.
I've said previously about, like, one of the key things for a trainer is you should be interested in your client, you should be curious about your client, and you should be inquisitive. You are not going to be any of those if you're not working in an area that you really love. And so find out where your passion is, and trust me, that will change.
Yeah.
Because if you look at my career, I was in the forces, I was a computer engineer, then I became a personal trainer, then I did nutrition, became more fascinated in nutrition. Then I got into education of nutrition with Future Fit and worked with them for 10 years. They paid for my PhD, or sorry, they sponsored my PhD. And then I became more interested in psychology. And now I work solely in behavior change. So I've shifted all the way through my career, and I've always shifted to what fascinated me. And that's what keeps it fresh and interesting for me. And I think that's what you should think about if you are going to work in the fitness arena. It is so broad. Become a specialist in one area.
Yeah.
And then you may find with time that I've had enough of that now. I'd like to look at something else. That's great. Do that.
Yeah. No harm in shifting.
But yeah, make sure you love it. Make sure you're curious. Don't just do it because you think, oh, well, I'm committed now. I've got to stick with this. No, you haven't. Learn something else.
Yeah, definitely. That's the thing. You can specialize in certain areas and stuff like that. But again, it's I have that conversation when someone first calls about a course. I sort of waffle on, like, again, we've gone way off track now, so apologies for anyone listening. But I always sort of waffle on and get more into why they're even thinking about doing a course in the first place. Who do they want to work with? What area do they live in? Are they going to do it online, face to face, hire a studio? And before I know it, we've been speaking for about half an hour, and they've not even signed. This is just an inquiry, and we've sort of almost mapped out what they're going to be doing in their career based off who they want to work with, etc. And the course itself is almost irrelevant. Like, it's not irrelevant. Anyone that's listening to this, you need to do the bloody course to understand that side of things. But a lot of it is understanding who it is you want to target. Like you said a second ago, knowing your market, who you want to work with, where you fit within that market. And then you've got like the business side of things that come into it. But again, it's just so frustrating when you see people in the group asking, oh, I'm doing this in my course. How do I fill out this sheet? And it's like, why is your course provider not helping you with this sort of stuff? But
Yeah.
again, I could easily waffle on about that all day in another video, so I have to hold myself back. But no, cheers for that. And like I said, I think that sort of that guide that you showed is quite a good introduction. I think, obviously, correct me if I'm wrong, I think that's sort of quite a good introduction into sort of shifting a behavior change and sort of thought patterns of a client. Would you be right in saying that?
Yeah, it's so important for trainers to understand that. I don't think we teach enough behavior change to our personal trainers. The level 3 shows them the stages of change model, but it actually very rarely talks about application and how you might actually use it. And at the end of the day, you could be a real expert in nutrition, you can be a real expert in exercise prescription, whatever it might be. But if you do not understand how your client's going to change, both of those skills go out the window, because unless they're willing to change, they won't take the advice on board.
No, that's the thing. Like you said, it is literally just that wheel of like pre-contemplation all the way around to relapse.
Yeah.
I think it needs to explain a little bit more off of those.
I 100%. I think we need as much of a module on behavior change in the level 3 syllabus as we do any other aspect.
Yeah.
Because as I say, at the end of the day, when a client comes to a trainer, whether it be Joe Blogs, Jill Blogs, who's a mum with 2 kids, whatever, or whether it be an elite athlete, they all want a behavior change. They've got to make something change in their lifestyle to achieve the goal they want to achieve. So if you don't understand how to facilitate that, all the other knowledge you possess is actually going to go in one ear and out the other.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's definitely. And I think is it the Raise the Bar survey or Lift the Bar? I forget the name of it. There was a survey done 2 years ago, and it highlighted that 80% of PTs didn't have sufficient skills in behavior change.
No.
So that's a big hole that as educators we should be filling.
Yeah, no, definitely. But then again, you know, you've sort of got your thing that hopefully can fill that gap and, you know, point people to you that need that, and, you know, doing little things like this and taking your time to come over and educate a few people. Like I said, if it can get people on the right track or asking questions or going away and reading stuff, then I'd like to think we've done a sort of little bit of our job towards.
Yeah, hopefully, yeah. And to follow up on that, if anybody has got questions after they've done this, by all means, drop me an email or message on Facebook or go to my website. You can contact me via that. You can book a 15-minute call for free if there's something you want to discuss. I'm more than happy to help people out wherever I can. It's kind of the main reason I've got into education in the first place, is just to try and improve standards generally in the leisure industry.
Yeah, no, exactly. No, I'm the same. I love it. I'll waffle on to anyone that will listen.
Me too.
Right, cool. On that note, I'm going to end that. And again, thank you very much for your time today, Gary. And
no problem.
People have found this useful and can get their clients thinking in a different path.
Right.
Cool.
Cheers, Carl.